Now, this morning we heard a great discussion about industry priorities, and they were all set against that backdrop of where we all need to get to. We all know we need to get to, and that is, of course, a decarbonized future. And we know also that that's not easy, certainly not in regulatory terms. It requires many things. There are many parts of the puzzle, and one of the most obvious is the tech. It's obvious, yes, but I don't think it's very often that we're able to hear from the engine manufacturers themselves about how decarbonization and prepping for it, or prepping our seafarers for it, how it looks from their perspective. So I'm delighted to welcome Lee and Dan, who between them represents pretty much the spectrum of 2- and 4-stroke engines. Now, I'm an anthropologist by background, so I'm not going to pretend to understand the technology. We are very much talking about the people, thankfully. Dan is Everllence's Prime Serve Academy Principal Product Manager and a leading instructor in 2-stroke dual-fuel engine technologies. There's a lot more to these people in the biographies in your brochure, but I'm going to try and save time and move straight into questions. And Lee is Wärtsilä's General Manager for UK and Ireland, driving commercial strategy across propulsion, life cycle, and decarbonization solutions. Thank you both. So I'd like this morning to talk about probably 3 main areas. We'll see where else we go to with it. Skills gaps is certainly one of them. The alignment that Rob talked about is really important too. And then I've got some final wrap-up questions too about where, similar to the previous panel, about not quite ripping it up and starting again, but kind of key takeaways. So let's make a start, and I don't mind who wants to jump in with these questions. But in terms of skills gaps, what new competencies do seafarers need to operate dual? I think I've lost my sound. Dual and alternative fuels. It's on? Okay, perfect, that's fine. All good? Yeah. So what new skills do we need, essentially, for seafarers? Have they got them? Are we designing systems that are too complex for training pipelines currently?
Who? Shall I go? Oh, can you hear me? Yeah. Hi, good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me here. I think to start with, of course, dual fuel has been around for 11 years now, actually. 2015 was sort of the introduction of the first dual fuel engines on LNG carriers, and that's developed, of course, continuously since then, the technology of dual fuel engines, but also, let's say, the adoption of dual fuel beyond LNG carriers. They're obviously very specialized vessels with cryogenic requirements for the storage of LNG and then the transfer of that into an engine to burn. I think, though, that competence and knowledge and understanding over those years has now been able to transfer into other types of vessels. We see them now in passenger ferries and cruise ships and things that are also taking on LNG. So I think competence in certain pockets is there already. That needs to be expanded. I think the understanding of how those vessels operate needs to be expanded across fleets. And of course that comes right down to the people and crews on board to be able to learn that. I think, as I say, that technology is developing continuously. The refinement of dual fuel from an LNG perspective continues to develop. And of course, now we introduce methanol and ammonia. And they do have kind of similarities, I think, in how they are stored, transferred, and burnt into an engine. So I think there's a transfer of knowledge that can be related to current vessels, let's say, in that segment. So I think, but it's still going to take a lot of learning, a lot of commitment to get there.
Okay.
Yeah, and of course, thank you also. Thank you, Rob, for allowing me to be here. When we look into two-stroke and we look into the ocean-going vessels, we see a huge demand for the last 5 years. Mm-hmm. And from the first ones, again, yes, back to the LNG carriers, we kind of did the learnings in the start, and everyone took it. Now we have to expand that rapidly because, to be honest, the success, we will call it, but we also see a major change in the new ships, where dual fuel is becoming not just a small little part of it, but it's become mainstream, and definitely also a good business case. And let's be honest, it is a good business case for most of them. But we are, of course, here having a challenge in speeding up. And I think it is starting with the to be ready, but also be aware of that it requires a sailor who will have new skills and competences.
Yeah.
And everyone around the table have to bring this operator into support. And it actually starts with those young guys and girls, or women, or maybe they will be our bosses very soon. So that to put those into perspective and put them into central, I think that is the biggest concern I have, because I see when the new ones are coming in that the skill sets that they were getting from school and what they were getting from the starting point of their career are definitely not what they need now. So because computing are taking over, and there is a lot of processes that needs to be refined to understand this. Now we talk data, we talk a lot of things, but to understand the data, to understand the processes, and remember there's an engine in behind. There we see a gap, in my point of view.
Thank you. Can you give me a sense of what that looks like? Like, so I guess you're mostly office-based. Like, can you give me some examples of how this plays out in your, like, how do you see the gap? And then we get into what we do about it. Thanks.
A short story is our CEO was trying to sell a huge complex dual fuel system for an operator in Singapore. And this operator had a 2-day stop that cost him about $500,000 because of 2 wires. And this CEO in between was saying, why should I buy all this advanced stuff when my crew can't install a sensor that are basically keeping me stopped and out of operation for 2 days? And that's definitely the challenge, where we are moving ourselves from purely mechanical analog to be way much more digital. And we will have, and it is complex, but we will have a lot of safety systems that will shut down if so. And that is not getting better. It's actually getting more advanced because we are trying to replace diesel. And that's the complexity.
Yeah, I agree. I think also one of the elements that I think Simon touched on also in the opening speech as well is communication. Technology of that, as we said, is advancing. Everyone's on their phones, or we have Teams, and I think what we have on board now is that connectivity. So monitoring and live support is also available. Of course, it still comes back down to training and competence of crew to operate these systems. Autonomy is growing heavily in propulsion systems, but crews still need to have the understanding. It cannot be fully automatic and operated by someone without the correct competence. So that still needs to be there. But these are the backup systems. These are the systems that are going to help us. And as OEMs, I think from a propulsion perspective, we also encourage that connectivity, that support that we want to give on board in live scenarios as well. When maybe if the wire is incorrect, actually be able to get back to a team that is able to help on first hand. I think also that going back to the training element, of course, simulation is a big part of today in how we can train crews up front in near to live scenarios, obviously replicating bridges, replicating engine rooms and control rooms and things like that. So we can really advance ourselves on having everybody shared with that type of knowledge.
Yeah, we're doing too. We have actually generated a digital twin for this, and it's just ongoing. It's not all of the processes that are digital today or twin-wise simulated, but the funny part of all this, advanced stuff is also to, again, back to understanding. And many customers say, if you could give me this twin, then I can put in my scenarios. Yeah, but then you just repeat your own accident. You're not getting back to, you're not finding the solution, you just see the same accident again and again. We should maybe try to work out what is missing. What are the missing link in this scenario that you have? And there, the crew or the back office, that in my perspective are the same thing. Those who operate the ship, both remotely, but definitely also on the ship, needs to be curious, but definitely also new both knowledge and skills. And there the mindset are changing from what we used to do.
It's just me. I won't take it personally. I'm going off script here. Apologies, don't worry. So this is super interesting, and I'm sensing that things are clearly changing. So from your perspective, what are the... I'm guessing you could, in very simple terms, say that 10 years ago, this is how training worked. We did this bit. Seafarers learned this bit at college. The company does this bit, and it worked okay-ish, maybe. I don't know. It's clearly changing, and you're under different pressures. I'm curious as to what those pressures are, because it seems to me that you're taking a lot of responsibility for seafarers being able to use your equipment safely, which is right. I'm guessing that's not a simple thing for you to do. You have commercial pressures too. And then a separate question, not really related, but we have lots of cadets in the room, and I'd be interested what your message to them would be. Sorry, that's a bit of a separate question, but yeah.
Well, I'll try going first. Yeah, so I think obviously it goes back to that fundamental point of training up front and collaborating across all the sectors. I think the ship owners taking responsibility. I think classification societies setting the correct rules, especially when we talk about future fuels and the complexities around that. So to make sure that we're all working together to set that up for people to engage with, say. I think that we can try, obviously from a simulator perspective, the OEMs also providing the training on the new equipment, the latest equipment, making that available for anybody who wishes to participate, not trying to capture it in any way. There is a commercialization, I'll be honest about that, because we have a cost to provide training, and that cost is passed on to the ship owners or whoever. But it's there, and it's growing, I think, and it's our responsibility to all be part of that in making sure that new technology is then put at the forefront of availability, let's say.
If you're looking 10 years back or 12 years back, and I took over the training program of our portfolio, we had 3 engine types. Now we have 12, and 8 of them are different type of alternative fuels. Some of them can explode. Some of them don't drink them, then you die. Now the new one is coming in, can have severe consequences where ghost vessels is actually a theme. So, of course, we have to engineer ourselves out of it, but it will make it more complicated. And we have to engineering ourselves out of it. Then, of course, if we can make it simple, that's always a journey. And if you're looking into, like, when we are changing 80, 90 years ago from coal to diesel, there was also a lot of things. And how to prepare and what is going on with this new shit. And there have been many funny solutions until what we see today, where it's basically not the same, engine itself is the same, but it's just maximized in engineering and are performing things that we couldn't imagine 20, 30 years ago. So we are, of course, maximizing a lot, but it is undoubtedly getting more complex when we start to deal with ammonia, when we start to deal with methanol and LPG or whatever it is. And yes, it could be nice, one training and then you are fit to all. But the complexity here is difficult. But if I can put these the next generation, the ones who have to save us all, in afraid of being, I'm trying not to be the old grumpy white man, but follow pipes. I think that was the advice I got when I started sailing. It means if you look into saying, okay, look into your system, understand the process, because all of these are processes. And if you understand the processes, then you also understand why it's engineered in this way. And then put more curiosity into electrical part, because no matter what, the last 10 years, we have never seen a ship with so many controllers, so many types of PLCs and whatever that are equipped on the ship today. And we are maybe the worst one. So in this way, be curious, but still remember that the ship is still the ship, the engine is still there, the propeller is still there. There's still need of auxiliary systems and so on and so on and so on. It's just getting more complex. So don't forget the roots and be curious of what's gonna hit, and then don't trust YouTube. There are good things there, but there's definitely also wrong things there.
Just on the cadets, I think you're right, Dan. Curiosity is a very big element to this, but I think it's a massive opportunity, because it's not just about dual fuels or future fuels. It's also about the other technologies we mentioned, wind power assist, and you have the air bubbles on the hull, and then you have electrification. So all these elements are massive opportunities. They are a challenge, but a great opportunity to be really at the forefront of this new technology, to be part of that in the learning curve. So I think that would be kind of one of the elements I would say to cadets as well. It's a really good time to start, I would say.
Mike, thank you. So not all doom and gloom, and maybe we've got time for questions in a bit in response. It's still, so taking your point, it's not all, there's lots of opportunity. It still sounds, and I think, it still sounds quite overwhelming. I think if I were on a ship now, I would find it still quite overwhelming. Curiosity is always valuable in any sector, and I totally take that point. But can we just stick with the point of explore a bit further? Like, so that's the takeaway for the seafarers. You're doing what you're doing. Where's the rest of how's the responsibility working out, and how could we shift things to make the shared responsibility for equipping seafarers work better? And in that also, could we also think about how we avoid a two-tier system in training, so that, to use the language of the just transition, which I think we'll talk about more in perhaps the next session, so that we don't leave parts of the world behind.
So I take this one first? Okay, yeah. I'll try anyway. I think, yeah, one of the answering the two-tier system part first is we need to all ensure there's inclusivity of everybody in that learning journey, you know, of how the technology develops and how our competence develops. So we need to make sure that we are making platforms and assets available for everybody to learn. And there needs to be a baseline. There needs to be kind of a minimum level of understanding of technologies and the basics around that. And then perhaps seafarers can specialize in certain areas depending which company they work for and which segment and which type of vessel and which type of fuel. I think there's going to be different fuels around the world available. There's going to be different segments of vessels, different vessel types that are taking on that fuel. So I think there's going to be such a variety of elements to learn, but there needs to be a baseline understanding. And that's what I would say we need to focus on in creating some standards and understanding for new seafarers in learning, and whether that be in the classroom, whether it be through OEMs, maybe onboard training, or through simulation, right back to the beginning at the university level, you know, when cadets are starting. So we need to focus on that, I would say. And that really should come through the collaboration of all parties involved. So classification, as I mentioned, OEMs, the ship owners, the universities, and things like that.
Just before I come, that's interesting. So you feel that baseline can come from a collaboration. It's not only from the training institution.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that we all need to be involved somewhere or another. I think we need to, maybe, I don't know if it's a separate body, but somebody needs to get together and say, okay, what do we need to create here that's starting as a minimum standard that we should be inducting cadets with as an understanding, because it is evolving quite quickly. I think the pathways are not fully known yet. Obviously, it's depending on fuel availability. It's based on safety cases of using that fuel in certain scenarios. So all that needs to be mapped out a bit more, but the baseline needs to be got together, I think, from the beginning.
I think we should look into the universities. I think we should look into the material there. I think we have to find some common ground. I think also we have to be recognizing it's impossible to be up to date on everything, and that is maybe not needed. But common grounds on the common skills. So we have a new cadet coming out and are taking a career, and are starting with a better learning platform than before. And unfortunately, I also see, not in IMEC, but I see many different types of institutions where they are not updated and they are teaching in 20 or 30 years old equipment, sometimes even things we're not selling anymore. So that's a shame, and that's of course also a responsibility we have to take. So I think it's about finding common grounds, but it's definitely also for everyone to be aware of that what we are trying to do, and come on, we are polluting 3% of the world's CO2, and if we're looking into the ammonia, we can reduce that with 95%. That's amazing. And being crew member, going out and having that possibility to almost save the world, that's amazing. But it of course also require a lot of new skills and knowledge and awareness of it. And unfortunately, I'm afraid that we see an accident before we get that together. But it is complex, and I think there it's difficult to find common ground in everything. But way much more are you into, cruise or small ferries, then it's one technology, and are you ocean going on a methanol, then it's another solution. And there is definitely difficulties today where we see customers that are taking an IGF training and they want to train methanol, but they have to take a week of LNG that they will never see and they will never have, and they don't have it in the fleet. That's of course regulations and different types of codes that are not adapted. And that is difficult in that speed that we have right now. And I think we will see the next 10 years massive engineering and different types of ideas and different types of solutions out there. So I think it will be difficult. So that's where I think we should look into the cadets and the basic education and improve that.
Thanks, Dan. So one of the barriers first of all, I must just acknowledge the quotes, which I can't repeat, about you're saving the world, which I think is a clear winner for the day. I love that. So let's try and maintain that optimism. That said, some of the small barriers along the way, in terms of the universities, for example. So yes, there is obviously need for investment in some universities in some parts of the world in equipment, in upskilling lecturers and so forth. And certainly in my job and my day job, I'm very aware of that, and I know there are initiatives in place. So that's one barrier that there is some work towards, for sure. I'm curious, so I've got a few questions. So one is what are the other big barriers? And then perhaps actually before that, do you think we're over or underestimating how aligned we are or how prepared we are for this multi-fuel world? So under or overestimating some of the barriers to success. And then thirdly, can you give us some more examples of what good looks like in terms of cases where you felt it has worked well, like where there has been alignment in the different players, where we could build on that.
Okay, thank you. I think that we probably in the answer underestimating, and that's, I think, purely because of the volume of vessels out there sailing with future fuels, with dual fuels, and I think we have now something like 140 ammonia vessels sailing, but there's around about 400 ammonia-ready vessels. So it's kind of it's waiting for that full transition to happen. And I think Rob mentioned 11,000 vessels represented just here, and we're talking about 140 globally with an ammonia-fueled vessel. So it's a very tiny portion of what we've got at the moment. So I think the challenge is that volume and that speed of how it's going to transition. Everybody's pushing for it. Everyone's got to get together and do that. But so I think there's a kind of a challenge in trying to answer the question fully, but there's certainly an underestimation, I think, of what's coming. Depends on other technologies. I mentioned carbon capture also, I think was mentioned this morning as well in presentation. So there's so many facets of things that can be happening. It's so difficult to keep up with it. It is so difficult for anyone to decide which area do they focus on. As I say, it's very difficult to focus on all, but that's why it needs that baseline. So I think there's an underestimation, but in the fact of, because we just don't know yet. We don't know what's going to emerge where, what's going to be available, how do these fuels get produced, which vessels are they going, which routes are they going to go on. It's a real challenge.
If we say underestimating is that we are not ready, then it's underestimating. I think we many times say, come on, we can do this. We did this with LNG, and now we can do it this. So that's definitely maybe that's where I'm saying be not starting to be bold, but actually trying to be prepared. But then when does it happen? And what I see many times is a new project, and there's a budget, everyone go full in, and sometimes are using a hell lot of energy and money on a very, very small group of people. But then when that crew is exchanged, then there is no training, then there are nothing. So then it's not the projects that are coming out, the sea trial, the first ones, that's always exciting. But the tough work is always down the hill. And we have ships that are inoperative like 5, 10 years. And most of these, where we're seeing starting troubles that are occurring, is maybe not in the start, where everyone is on their toe. But there's also a daily life afterwards. And there's also a crew that have to be exchanged once in a while. And there, I think we have to have a more focus in making sure that the poor guy or poor woman are ready. Because we can easily blame a lot, but are we actually putting the people into the position so they are ready for it?
Thank you. I'm going to try and leave a tiny bit of time for some questions. So let me try and pull some of this together with some final questions. So rather than dwelling on like what good looks like, can I ask you both to have a stab at this? Like, as final thoughts, if you had to say one thing that the industry should start doing immediately, what would it be? And one thing it should stop doing immediately, what would it be? And one area in which, I think this is the easier one, collaboration is a non-negotiable. Good luck.
I'll have a stab at it then first, thank you. I think starting, it goes back to the curiosity. I think the industry needs to start curious about what it is we need to do, and what technologies are there, keeping abreast of all that, making sure that the cadets coming through are getting that exposure of all the technologies, and even maybe what the future might look like as well. Not even what it is today, but what the future might look like. So I think we need to start doing that. Stopping, I'm not sure. It's a difficult one. Yeah. It's kind of... I think that we continue to go on the journey. I think that obviously we've got some very hard deadlines to meet with 2030 and 2050. That's still obviously some things maybe still be decided later this year with IMO and etc. So I think we need to continue to watch what goes on in the market and how developments are going to take place with companies that are involved, like ours, and all parties around it. So it's difficult to say what to stop, I think. What good looks like, I think from an engine manufacturer, and I think Everllence will be very similar, you want to be agnostic. It doesn't matter. You want to have a system, a platform, let's say a vessel, that can take on all different types of energy sources and operate, because otherwise then you become too unique in one particular area, and that's where we need to be quite widespread. So that's a utopia that hopefully everyone's aiming for, and whether it will happen or when it will happen, we don't know. But I think what good looks like is having a platform that is flexible with the crew that are able to operate it, I would say.
Yeah, I think the questions are difficult to because what we definitely shouldn't stop is being curious, but also be aware. I think that starts with the awareness, for sure. What we shouldn't do, or what we absolutely should stop with, I'm getting frustrated when I experience I'm visiting many training centers around the world, and there I definitely can see that they are using simulations that are wrong. So there maybe we should look into a little. So we definitely see that the simulations definitely work wrong. It behaves wrongly, and thereby, could you imagine having a simulator driving a car, and then you're going out to a real car, and then it actually works totally different. So there I could be a little. That should be stopped. But here we have a free world, and who defines what are the right and wrong, and who defines that I don't have an answer for. But there's definitely people who are trying to earn money, where that part is having a greater impact than actually the content and how the reactions are for it. But that would be difficult to fix. But I can be worried about it. So that's a thing we should definitely try to avoid as a whole. For the future, educate the teachers better.
But a quick one, we all mentioned collaboration, we mentioned transparency, and I oversee the strategic planning of training and development for parachuting. And we all know that the engines are coming out, the new age technology is coming out, and the technology gap is really widening with the competency gap. We, as an industry, are struggling to have the technical know-how of how these engines, the new age technology, new age fuels work. Right? Lee rightly said we should collaborate. But how do we collaborate? On what level do we collaborate? Is the call to action is something we are missing today. Transparency. You said you have confidentiality between OEMs. And that's where companies like us struggle, because presently the lack of understanding of how or what that equipment is all about is the biggest factor in us being able to train our future generation seafarers to be able to go and safely work on board these ships. So my question, and it's straight call to action, is how in today's world we can come, and there are three manufacturers, let's be honest, WinGD, Wärtsilä, and Everllence. How all three of you can collaborate to provide us information or use case studies from your testings in the engine that's going on, which can easily be retrievable for us as industry users, as the end users, to be able to train our seafarers. Because that's the gap which I very clearly see. Right? We have been able to establish guidelines. Right? Industry has worked very hard. And however, we need that technical information. If I need to drive a BMW, I need to know about BMW. Right? So that's where we lack. So how can we do that? How can we achieve that transparent, streamlined, credible information? Like Dan said, training has been done, but is it correct? Is it relevant? How can we achieve that?
Thank you for the question. Yeah, I think as OEMs, we definitely need to work with the universities. You know, I think the universities are doing great moves in simulation and using the latest of technologies, of VR included, of course, and to simulate what goes on. And we need to make sure that we're working with them to keep their data up to date, making sure that as I think Dan mentioned also, the lecturers are all up to speed with the latest technologies and safety regulations and processes that should do that. I think also as OEMs, we have training centers around the world. I think typically, you know, if a ship owner is building a new vessel, we will also need to promote what the equipment is on that vessel in terms of training. So offering training directly to crew during the commissioning phase or the build phase of a vessel, especially if it's a new technology. So we need to be at the forefront of making sure that we are advertising and making available training for ship owners, for their crews to be trained upon. But I say in conclusion as well, making sure that we're working with the universities on their training programs, but it needs, I think, two-way kind of collaboration on that. We can't reach out to everyone. We need to probably have them reaching out to us as well, asking for that interaction and working together.
Shortly, I think it's a big question. I'm discussing that with the management every week. How do we change this? How do we fix it? And thereby the answer can be a little blurry because how do we fix? Because we have so many places seafarers are being trained, and now I'm looking into educational, because when we have training centers, and we call it in our position academies, then it's high-ranking officers we are targeting. Then it's the high level for, of course, taking over whatever that this customer needs to be a success, because that's our purpose. That is to bring the customer into a success operation, and we can definitely see that the crew that have been trained are having a way better performance than the ones who haven't. So that's of course nice to know that we are doing something right, but to then add it in and then teach or bring up the material for content globally, that's a big task. I think it starts with the authorities. I do think. Yeah.
Super. Thank you so much. I'm afraid we don't have time for more questions from the floor, but I believe we've had an awful lot submitted, which is fabulous. And as Rob said earlier, we will be getting responses to those to you latterly. So that's very much appreciated for your engagement. And I'd like to thank both Lee and Dan for a really insightful, thought-provoking session. And on to the next one. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.